The howl of a distant coyote echoed through the darkening Arizona sky as Marigold Nelson clenched her jaw, determined not to show fear despite the rough rope cutting into her wrists and the bark of the cottonwood tree digging painfully into her back. It was 1876, and the once promising journey west to start a new life had turned into a nightmare when the stagecoach was ambushed just outside Tucson. "Ain't no one coming for you, missy," sneered the taller of the two outlaws, a man with a pockmarked face who called himself Rattlesnake. He spat a stream of tobacco juice that landed inches from her dusty boots. "That fancy jewelry of your mama's will fetch a fine price in Nogales." Marigold's eyes burned with unshed tears at the mention of her mother's heirloom pieces, all she had left after burying both parents back east in Baltimore. At 22, she had hoped to make a fresh start with her aunt in San Francisco, but the stagecoach driver and the other passengers had been shot during the ambush. Only she remained alive, a bargaining chip the outlaws decided to keep for their amusement or perhaps ransom. "The boss will decide what to do with you tomorrow," said the second outlaw, a younger man with a burned scar across his cheek. "Best hope he's in a generous mood." As the outlaws settled by their campfire 30 yards away, Marigold tested the ropes again. The hemp bit deeper into her already raw skin. The April night was growing colder, and her thin traveling dress provided little protection against the desert chill. She wondered if she would survive to see the dawn. Hours passed. The outlaws' laughter grew louder as they passed a whiskey bottle between them. Eventually, their voices tapered off as they slumped into drunken sleep. Marigold's head drooped, exhaustion competing with fear, when the sound of soft hoofbeats made her stiffen. A lone horse appeared at the edge of the firelight, its rider barely more than a shadow. The man dismounted with fluid grace, his movements nearly silent as he approached the sleeping outlaws. Marigold held her breath. Was this a third member of their gang returning to camp? The stranger checked the outlaws, then moved toward her, moonlight finally revealing his face. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a strong jawline shadowed by several days' growth of beard. A worn cavalry hat sat low on his brow, and his eyes, when they met hers, were the color of the stormy sky. "Don't scream," he whispered, drawing a knife from his belt. Marigold's heart hammered in her chest as he stepped behind the tree. She felt the cool blade against her wrists as he sawed through the ropes. "Who are you?" she whispered as her hands came free, pain shooting through her arms as blood rushed back into her fingers. "Name's Zachary Prescott," he murmured, working on the ropes binding her to the trunk. "Most folks call me Zach. Was tracking these two after they raided a ranch near Tucson." He paused as one of the outlaws grunted and turned in his sleep. "Hold still. Almost done." When the last rope fell away, Marigold nearly collapsed as her legs buckled beneath her. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. "Easy now," Zach said softly, supporting her weight. "Can you walk?" Marigold nodded, though her limbs felt like water. "My belongings, no time. They could wake any moment." He led her to his horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding that stood patiently in the shadows. With gentle hands, he helped her into the saddle, then swung up behind her. As they rode away from the outlaw camp, his arm steadied her around the waist, his body warm against her back. Once they were a safe distance away, he guided the horse into a small ravine hidden from view. "You're safe now," he said, his voice deep and reassuring in the darkness. "Those bandits won't find us here." Marigold turned to face her rescuer, taking in his weathered features in the moonlight. "Thank you, Mr. Prescott. I thought," her voice broke, "I was certain they meant to kill me." "Zach," he corrected gently. "And you are?" "Marigold Nelson," she replied, rubbing her chafed wrists. I was traveling to San Francisco when they attacked the stagecoach. Everyone else is." She couldn't finish the sentence. His expression softened with understanding. "I know. I found the stage earlier today. Followed their trail from there." He pulled a canteen from his saddlebag. "Here, drink." The water was cool and sweet against her parched throat. As she handed back the canteen, their fingers brushed, sending an unexpected warmth through her despite her exhaustion and fear. "We'll rest here until first light," Zach said, spreading a blanket on the ground. "Then I'll take you to Silverwater Creek. It's a small town about half a day's ride from here." "What about the Outlaws? They stole everything I had." A flicker of something dangerous crossed his face. "They'll be dealt with. The law has been after Rattlesnake Joe and his gang for months." He paused. "For now, you need rest. Tomorrow will come soon enough." Marigold wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, grateful for its warmth. She watched as Zach checked his rifle and pistol before settling down with his back against a boulder, clearly intending to keep watch through the night. "Why did you help me?" she asked softly. "You could have been killed." His eyes met hers in the darkness. "Some things a man can't ride past, Miss Nelson. Some wrongs need righting." He adjusted his hat. "Get some sleep if you can. You're safe now." Despite her fears and the hardness of the ground beneath her, Marigold fell into an exhausted sleep, the steady presence of her rescuer keeping the nightmares at bay. Dawn broke with the gentle colors of rose and gold painting the Arizona sky. Marigold awoke with a start, momentarily disoriented until the events of the previous day came rushing back. She sat up quickly, wincing at her stiff muscles. Zach was already awake, crouched by a tiny, smokeless fire brewing coffee in a battered tin pot. His keen eyes noticed her movement immediately. "Morning," he said, pouring dark coffee into a tin cup. "How are you feeling?" "Alive," she answered honestly, accepting the cup with gratitude. "Thanks to you," he nodded, his expression revealing little. In the morning light, she could see him more clearly, the weathered tan of his skin, the faint scar that cut through his left eyebrow, the crow's feet at the corners of his eyes suggesting he smiled more than his current serious demeanor indicated. His clothes were trail-worn but clean. A faded blue cotton shirt, buckskin vest, and denim trousers tucked into well-used boots. "We should move soon," he said, dousing the small fire with the remaining coffee. "Those outlaws will be looking for us when they wake up." "Mr. Prescott, Zach," Marigold began, straightening her rumpled dress as best she could. "I have no way to repay you for what you've done. I had money, but the outlaws," he waved away her concern. "I'm not looking for payment, Miss Nelson." "Marigold, please." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Marigold," he said her name carefully as though testing the feel of it. "Pretty name." She felt her cheeks warm and looked away. "It was my grandmother's. My mother always said I bloomed bright like my namesake." Zach packed his meager supplies efficiently. "We need to cover as much ground as possible before the day gets too hot. Silverwater Creek has a decent hotel where you can rest properly." "And then what?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, the reality of her situation crashing down upon her. She was alone in unfamiliar territory, without money or possessions, her plans in ruins. Zach paused, studying her face. "One step at a time. First, we get you somewhere safe, then we can figure out the rest." He offered his hand to help her up. "Ready to ride." His calloused palm was warm against hers as she stood, and for a moment they remained that way, connected by that simple touch. Marigold felt a curious fluttering in her chest before he released her hand and turned to his horse. They rode in companionable silence as the sun climbed higher. Zachary sat behind her in the saddle, his arms on either side as he held the reins, creating a cocoon of safety she hadn't felt since leaving Baltimore. Despite the circumstances, she found herself noticing the strength in his forearms, the clean scent of his skin beneath the trail dust. "Have you been a lawman long?" she asked, breaking the silence. He hesitated. "I'm not exactly a lawman, madam, not anymore." "Oh," she twisted slightly to see his face. "What are you, then?" "Just a man trying to make things right where I can." His expression closed, and she sensed there was much he wasn't saying. "I used to ride with the Arizona Rangers, but these days I work alone, hunting outlaws, sometimes." His voice was measured. "Mostly I take odd jobs, ranch work, guiding travelers, tracking lost cattle. But when word reached me about Rattlesnake's gang hitting homesteads and stage coaches, I couldn't sit idle." "That's very noble," Marigold said softly. He made a noncommittal sound. "Not noble, necessary." By midday, the heat had become oppressive. They stopped at a small creek to rest the horse and replenish their water. Marigold sank gratefully onto a flat rock in the shade of a cottonwood, similar to the one she'd been tied to the night before. The memory made her shudder. Zach noticed. "We're well away from them now," he assured her, misreading her reaction. "About 2 hours more to Silverwater Creek." "It's not that." She touched the raw marks on her wrists. "I keep thinking about what might have happened if you hadn't come along." He knelt beside the creek, splashing water on his face. "But I did." "How did you find me?" "I've been tracking Rattlesnake's gang for weeks," he explained, refilling the canteen. "When I came across the stagecoach." He paused, his expression grim. "I buried the others proper, madam." Said words over them. Tears pricked at Marigold's eyes. "Thank you for that kindness." Found signs they'd taken a prisoner, followed their trail. He shrugged as if it were that simple, but Marigold knew it was anything but. "You risked your life for a stranger." Zach's eyes met hers, startlingly blue against his tanned skin. Seemed like the right thing to do. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding, perhaps, or the first fragile thread of connection. Marigold looked away first, suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance. "I must look a fright," she murmured, attempting to smooth her tangled hair. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You look like a woman who survived an ordeal that would have broken most." His words warmed her more than they should have. She dipped her hands in the cool creek water and washed her face, wishing she had a comb, a clean dress, any of the simple comforts she'd taken for granted before. "Ready to continue?" Zach asked, already preparing the horse. The remaining journey passed more quickly, as Marigold told him about her life in Baltimore, her parents' untimely deaths from influenza, and her decision to join her mother's sister in San Francisco, where Aunt Cordelia ran a successful millinery shop. "I've never been that far west," Zach commented as the outlines of a small settlement appeared in the distance. "Heard San Francisco is quite a city, though." "And now I may never see it," Marigold said quietly. He guided the horse around a bend in the trail. "Don't give up so easily, Miss Nelson. You've come this far." Silverwater Creek proved to be little more than a wide spot in the road, a dusty main street lined with a general store, a small bank, a saloon, the promised hotel, and a smattering of other businesses. Still, after her ordeal, it looked like paradise to Marigold. Zach helped her dismount in front of the 2-story hotel, his hands gentle at her waist. "Wait here," he said, securing the horse to the hitching post. "Let me arrange a room for you." She watched as he disappeared inside, suddenly afraid to be alone even in this seemingly peaceful town. Several passers-by glanced curiously in her direction, no doubt noting her disheveled appearance. She straightened her spine, determined not to appear as vulnerable as she felt. When Zach emerged from the hotel, he was accompanied by a plump woman with kind eyes. "This is Mrs. Lambert," he introduced. "She owns the hotel and has a room ready for you." "You poor dear," Mrs. Lambert said, taking in Marigold's condition. "Mr. Prescott told me what happened. Come inside, we'll get you settled." Marigold turned to Zach. "You're not leaving, are you?" "I need to let the sheriff know about the stagecoach and the Outlaws," he said. "But I'll be back. Mrs. Lambert will take good care of you." Something in his steady gaze reassured her. "Thank you again." "Rest well, Marigold," he said, tipping his hat before turning toward the sheriff's office down the street. Mrs. Lambert led her into the modest hotel lobby. "Mr. Prescott explained your situation, that those outlaws took everything. He's paid for your room and meals for 3 days." Marigold's eyes widened. "He did, but he hardly knows me." The older woman smiled knowingly. "That's the kind of man Zachary Prescott is, honey. Doesn't say much, but his actions speak volumes. Now let's get you a hot bath and some clean clothes. I have a daughter about your size who'd be glad to lend you a dress until we can sort something out." The promised bath was heaven. Marigold soaked until the water cooled, washing away the dust and fear of the past day. Mrs. Lambert's daughter's dress was a simple blue calico that fit well enough, and the older woman even provided a hairbrush and some pins. Later, feeling more human, Marigold ventured downstairs to the small dining room. She had just started on a bowl of beef stew when Zach entered. He'd clearly taken time to clean up as well. His dark hair was damp, his face freshly shaved except for a neatly trimmed mustache. He spotted her and crossed the room, removing his hat as he approached. "Miss Nelson, you're looking better." "As are you," she replied, gesturing to the chair across from her. "Please join me, and thank you for arranging everything. Mrs. Lambert told me you paid for my stay." He sat down, looking slightly uncomfortable. "It's nothing. It's not nothing to me." She met his eyes directly. "What did the sheriff say about the Outlaws?" "He's sending a telegram to Tucson. They'll send men to investigate the stagecoach and track Rattlesnake's gang." A shadow crossed his face. "But the sheriff here is spread thin. They might not move quickly enough." "You're planning to go after them yourself, aren't you?" Marigold asked, recognizing the determination in his expression. He nodded slowly. "First light tomorrow. I can't let them get away with what they've done. But it's dangerous. You'd be facing them alone. Wouldn't be the first time." He accepted a cup of coffee from the waitress with a nod of thanks. "Besides, they have something that belongs to you." Marigold's hand went involuntarily to her throat, where her mother's locket should have been. "My mother's jewelry isn't worth your life, Mr. Prescott." "Zach," he reminded her. "And it's not just about the jewelry. Men like that will keep hurting innocent people unless someone stops them." Their eyes locked across the table, and Marigold saw in his gaze a resolve that both impressed and frightened her. This was a man driven by principles, by a code that didn't allow him to look away from injustice. "Then I'm coming with you," she said suddenly, surprising herself as much as him. His eyebrows shot up. "That's not happening." "They're my belongings," she insisted, "and I can identify them. Besides, I know what they look like up close. I heard them talking about their plans. It's too dangerous. More dangerous than being tied to a tree by outlaws." She leaned forward. "I'm not some delicate flower, Mr. Prescott. I survived that ordeal, and I won't sit here helplessly while you risk your life partly on my account." A flicker of admiration crossed his face, quickly replaced by concern. "You're not trained for this kind of situation. Then train me." The words came out before she could reconsider. "At least teach me to defend myself. If you leave me here alone, what's to stop Rattlesnake and his friend from finding me again?" Zach fell silent, studying her with those penetrating blue eyes. Finally, he sighed. "You're either the bravest or the most foolhardy woman I've ever met, Miss Nelson." "Probably a bit of both," she admitted with a small smile. "And it's Marigold, remember. A reluctant smile touched his lips. Marigold, all right, I'll teach you some basics of self-defense, but that doesn't mean you're coming with me when I track them down. It was a start, and Marigold knew better than to push further for now. They finished their meal discussing more neutral topics: the town, the territory, the changes sweeping across the West as railroads pushed ever farther into once isolated regions. As they parted for the night at the bottom of the stairs leading to the guest rooms, Zach paused. "Meet me behind the hotel at sunrise. Wear something you can move in easily, and don't expect me to go easy on you just because you're a lady." Marigold lifted her chin. "I wouldn't respect you if you did." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or appreciation. "Good night, Marigold." "Good night, Zach." As she climbed the stairs to her room, Marigold wondered at her own boldness. Less than 2 days ago, she had been a proper Boston-raised young woman, headed for a respectable life with her aunt in San Francisco. Now, she was in a dusty frontier town, planning to learn self-defense from a former ranger with the intention of confronting dangerous outlaws. Yet somehow, despite everything, she felt more alive than she had in years. Morning arrived with the soft golden light that precedes sunrise. Marigold had slept fitfully, her dreams filled with shadowy figures and the sensation of being bound and helpless. She rose quickly, splashed cold water on her face, and dressed in the simplest of the borrowed garments: a split skirt that Mrs. Lambert's daughter used for riding, and a plain shirtwaist. The air was cool as she slipped out the back door of the hotel. Zach was already waiting, his tall figure silhouetted against the lightening sky. He wore the same clothes as the previous day, with the addition of a gunbelt at his hip. "You came," he said, sounding faintly surprised. "Did you think I wouldn't?" He shrugged. "Most women I've known would have reconsidered after a night's sleep in a comfortable bed. I'm not most women." A smile tugged at his mouth. "I'm beginning to see that." He gestured toward a small clearing behind the stables. "Let's begin before the town wakes up. We'll have more privacy." For the next hour, he taught her basic defensive moves: how to break free from different holds, where to strike to cause maximum pain with minimum effort, how to use an attacker's weight and momentum against them. He was a patient teacher, firm but never condescending, and Marigold proved to be a quick study. "You're doing well," he said as they paused for a break. "But remember, your best weapon is surprise. Most men won't expect a woman to fight back." Marigold nodded, pushing a loose strand of hair from her flushed face. "Like the Outlaws didn't expect you to come for me." His expression turned serious. "About that, I still don't think you should come with me." "I understand your concern," she said, choosing her words carefully. "But consider this: if I stay here alone and they come looking for me while you're gone, what then? At least with you, I'd have protection and a fighting chance." Zach frowned, clearly torn. "You make a fair point. Besides," she added, "you said yourself that the sheriff is understaffed. 2 sets of eyes are better than 1 when tracking." He studied her for a long moment. "You're determined, aren't you? As determined as you are to go after them." He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "All right. But you follow my lead. Do exactly as I say, and at the first sign of real trouble you get to safety. Deal. Deal." She extended her hand to shake on it, a decidedly unladylike gesture that seemed appropriate under the circumstances. His large hand enveloped hers, warm and calloused. "We leave at noon. Get some rest and a good meal. It'll be a hard ride." As they walked back toward the hotel, Marigold felt a curious mix of anxiety and anticipation. She was stepping far outside the boundaries of her previous life, into territory both frightening and exhilarating. "Why are you smiling?" Zach asked, noticing her expression. "I was just thinking that my mother would be scandalized by all of this," she admitted. She raised me to be a proper lady, to marry well and lead a quiet, respectable life. And yet here you are, learning to fight and chasing outlaws." His tone was light, but his eyes were serious when they met hers. "Do you regret it, coming west?" Marigold considered the question. "No," she said finally. "Despite everything, I don't regret it. Life in Baltimore was safe but stifling. After my parents died, I realized how quickly life can change, how precious each day is." She looked up at the vast Arizona sky. "Out here, I feel like I can breathe." Zach nodded slowly. "I understand that feeling. It's why I could never go back east, even when I had the chance." "You lived in the East, born in Pennsylvania. My father was a doctor. He wanted the same for me, sent me to school in Philadelphia." A wry smile crossed his face. "It didn't take." Marigold tried to imagine Zach in a city doctor's office and failed. "What brought you west?" "The war, initially." His expression darkened. "Served with the Union cavalry. Afterward, I couldn't settle back into civilian life there. Too many ghosts." He shrugged. "Came west with the army, then joined the Rangers when my enlistment ended." "And now?" she asked softly. "Now I go where I'm needed," he said simply. "Try to do some good where I can." They had reached the hotel's back entrance. Marigold turned to face him, suddenly aware of how much she wanted to know more about this complex, honorable man. "Thank you for the lessons," she said, "and for agreeing to let me come with you." "Don't thank me yet," he warned. "The trail ahead won't be easy." "Few worthwhile things are," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. Something shifted in his eyes, then a flicker of admiration, perhaps, or something warmer. But he merely nodded and tipped his hat. "Noon, Miss Nelson." "I'll be waiting out front with the horses." "Horses, plural?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "You didn't think we'd both ride Samson again, did you? I've arranged to borrow a mare from the livery." His mouth quirked. "Unless you'd prefer to continue sharing a saddle." Heat rose in Marigold's cheeks at the memory of riding pressed against him. "A separate horse will be fine, thank you." His low chuckle followed her into the hotel, the sound warming her in ways she wasn't prepared to examine too closely. True to his word, Zach was waiting with 2 horses at noon. Samson, his buckskin gelding, stood patiently beside a smaller bay mare. Both animals were saddled and laden with saddlebags containing provisions. Marigold had spent the morning preparing as best she could. Mrs. Lambert had provided her with a small pack containing a spare set of clothes, a canteen, and some basic supplies. She wore the split riding skirt again, along with a sturdier blouse and a wide-brimmed hat to protect against the sun. "Ever ridden before?" Zach asked as she approached. "My father kept horses in Baltimore," she replied. "I'm no expert, but I can manage." He nodded approvingly and introduced her to the mare. "This is Penny. She's steady and sensible, won't give you any trouble as long as you treat her right." Marigold stroked the horse's velvety nose, earning a soft nickering in response. "She's beautiful." "She's yours for as long as you need her," Zach said. "Sheriff Henderson sends his regards, by the way. He's grateful we're pursuing the outlaws, though he officially advised against it." "Of course he did," Marigold said with a smile. Zach helped her mount, his hands strong and sure at her waist. She settled into the saddle, adjusting her skirts while he checked the mare's girth and stirrups. "Comfortable?" he asked. "As much as can be expected." The truth was, it had been some time since she'd ridden, and she anticipated being sore by day's end. But she wouldn't complain. Zach swung easily onto Samson's back. "We'll head southwest, following the trail I tracked yesterday. If we're lucky, they're still camped within a day's ride. And if we're unlucky," his face was grim, "then we keep tracking them until we find them." They rode out of town side by side, drawing curious glances from the townsfolk. Marigold could only imagine what they thought a rough-looking former lawman and a proper-looking Eastern woman, clearly headed into the wilderness together. The scandal would have been tremendous in Baltimore society. Here, people merely watched with mild interest before returning to their business. Once beyond the town limits, Zach set a steady pace that Marigold could maintain comfortably. The landscape opened before them, rolling hills dotted with saguaro cacti, patches of scrub brush, and the occasional cottonwood marking the presence of hidden water. In the distance, purple mountains shimmered in the heat haze. "It's beautiful in its own way," Marigold remarked, taking in the vast emptiness. "Most people just see the harshness," Zach replied, glancing at her. "Takes a certain eye to see the beauty here." "My mother used to say that beauty reveals itself to those willing to look beyond the surface," she said softly. "I think she would have appreciated this place. She sounds like a wise woman." She was. Marigold's hand went automatically to her throat, feeling again the absence of her mother's locket. "That's why I need to get her jewelry back. It's all I have left of her." Zach's expression softened. "We'll find it." They rode in companionable silence for a time, the rhythmic sound of hooves on packed earth creating a soothing cadence. Marigold found herself studying her companion's profile, the straight nose, the firm jaw, the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, alert to any potential danger. "Tell me about being a ranger," she said eventually. "What made you leave?" He was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. Finally, he spoke, his voice measured. "Rangers do good work, important work. But there are rules, protocols. Sometimes justice gets tangled in red tape." His jaw tightened. 3 years ago, a gang similar to rattlesnakes raided a small settlement near the Mexican border, killed 4 men, 2 women. One of the women was pregnant. Marigold's heart constricted at the pain evident in his voice. "We tracked them for weeks," he continued. "Finally cornered them in a canyon. Had orders to bring them in alive if possible. The captain insisted on trying to negotiate their surrender." His knuckles whitened on the reins. "While we were talking, one of them shot a young ranger, just a kid, barely 20. Died in my arms." "I'm so sorry," Marigold said softly. Zach nodded once, acknowledging her sympathy. "Afterward, there was an investigation. The captain blamed me for firing first after the kid was shot, said I escalated the situation. Maybe I did. I turned in my badge the next day. That seems unfair. Maybe. But it was clear I wasn't cut out for following orders that didn't make sense to me." He looked at her directly. "I believe in justice, Miss Nelson, not just law. Sometimes they're not the same thing." The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "I think I understand." "And it's Marigold, remember?" A small smile softened his features. "Marigold." He pronounced it with care, as though savoring the syllables. "Suits you." She blushed and looked away, focusing on the trail ahead. "How much farther do you think they are?" "Hard to say. The sign I found yesterday suggested they were heading toward the border, probably to fence your jewelry in Mexico." He pointed to a range of hills in the distance. "If they maintained their pace, they might be camped somewhere in those foothills tonight." As the afternoon wore on, the heat became more intense. They stopped occasionally to rest the horses and drink from their canteens. Zach proved to be knowledgeable about the desert, pointing out plants that contained moisture and identifying the few animals that ventured out in the midday sun. Marigold found herself increasingly impressed by his competence and quiet strength. Unlike many men she had known in Baltimore, who measured their worth by their wealth or social connections, Zach's value lay in his actions, his principles, his unwavering sense of right and wrong. "What will you do after we catch the outlaws?" she asked during one of their rest stops. He shrugged, adjusting Samson's saddle. "Haven't thought that far ahead. Find another job, I suppose. There's always work for a man who can shoot straight and doesn't mind hard labor. And what about you?" he asked, turning the question back to her. "Still planning to go to San Francisco? I suppose I must," she said, though the prospect suddenly seemed less appealing than it had before her ordeal. "My aunt is expecting me, and I have nowhere else to go." Zach seemed about to say something more, but instead turned his attention to the horizon. "We should keep moving. I want to reach those hills before sundown." They mounted up again and continued their journey. As the afternoon shadows lengthened, Marigold noticed Zach becoming increasingly alert, his hand occasionally dropping to the revolver at his hip as he scanned the terrain. "Something wrong?" she asked, sensing his tension. "Not sure," he admitted. "Just a feeling, like we're being watched." Marigold's skin prickled with apprehension. "The Outlaws, or someone else. This is Apache territory." He guided Samson closer to her mare. "Stay close and keep your voice down." They proceeded more cautiously, Zach leading them on a less direct route that took advantage of whatever cover the sparse landscape offered. The sun was low in the western sky, casting long shadows across the desert floor, when Zach suddenly raised his hand, signaling her to stop. He dismounted silently and helped her down from Penny. "Wait here with the horses," he whispered, drawing his rifle from its scabbard. "I'll be right back." Before she could protest, he moved forward in a half-crouch, disappearing among the rocks and brush. Marigold waited anxiously, one hand on Penny's bridle, the other clutching Samson's reins. The only sounds were the soft shuffling of the horses and her own rapid breathing. Several tense minutes passed before Zach returned, his expression grim. "Found their camp," he said quietly. "They're in a small box canyon about a quarter-mile ahead. 3 men, not 2. 3. Marigold's heart sank. "I only saw 2 rattlesnake and the one with the burn scar. Looks like they met up with someone, probably the boss they mentioned." He guided her to a boulder where they could sit while he considered their options. "We need to wait until nightfall. They'll be less alert after they've had their supper and liquor." "What's the plan?" Marigold asked, trying to keep her voice steady despite her growing fear. Zach studied her face, clearly weighing how much to share. "I'll approach the camp after dark. With luck, I can retrieve your belongings without confrontation. And if luck isn't with you," his eyes hardened, "then I do what needs doing." The implication was clear, and Marigold felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cooling evening air. "And my role in all this? You stay with the horses, hidden. If you hear gunfire and I don't return within 10 minutes, you ride hard for Silverwater Creek." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Promise me that, Marigold. No heroics." She wanted to argue, to insist on helping, but the resolute set of his jaw told her it would be futile. "I promise." They led the horses to a small depression hidden from view of the canyon where the animals could be safely tethered. Zach unpacked some jerky and hardtack for their supper, along with a small flask of whiskey that he offered to Marigold. "For your nerves," he explained when she hesitated. "Just a sip." The liquor burned her throat, but spread a welcome warmth through her body. They ate in silence as darkness gradually claimed the desert. Stars appeared one by one until the sky was a magnificent tapestry of light against the velvet blackness. "It's time," Zach said finally, checking his weapons one last time. "Remember, if you hear shots and I don't come back, don't wait." "Ride for town." Marigold caught his arm as he turned to go. "Be careful," she whispered. "Please." In the starlight, his eyes were dark and unreadable. For a heart-stopping moment, she thought he might pull her close. But he merely nodded and slipped away into the shadows, leaving her alone with the horses and her racing thoughts. Time seemed to crawl as Marigold waited, straining her ears for any sound from the direction of the outlaw camp. The desert night was surprisingly loud, the whisper of wind through the brush, the occasional cry of a night bird, the distant yip of a coyote. She tried to focus on those natural sounds, to let them calm her, but her mind kept conjuring images of what might be happening. Zach discovered by the outlaws, outnumbered, wounded, or worse. She closed her eyes, saying a silent prayer for his safety. Then, abruptly, the night erupted in sound, the sharp crack of a gunshot, followed by two more in rapid succession. Marigold's heart leapt to her throat. She counted seconds, then minutes, trying to remember Zach's instructions. 10 minutes. If he didn't return in 10 minutes, she was to flee. 7 minutes passed. 8, 9. The sound of approaching footsteps made her reach for the small knife Zach had given her earlier. She pressed her back against a boulder, prepared to defend herself if necessary. Marigold, Zach's voice, low but urgent, relief flooded through her. Here, she called softly. He appeared from the darkness, moving quickly but without panic. In one hand he carried a small leather pouch. We need to go now. What happened? I heard shots. They spotted me as I was leaving their camp. He thrust the pouch into her hands. Your jewelry, I think. Check it quickly. With trembling fingers, Marigold opened the pouch and emptied the contents into her palm. In the faint starlight, she could make out her mother's gold locket, a pair of pearl earrings, and a small diamond brooch, all the precious keepsakes she had carried from Baltimore. It's all here, she breathed. Thank you. Thank me when we're safely away, he said, already moving toward the horses. The good news is I only had to deal with Rattlesnake and one other. The third man was gone, probably scouting or hunting. Did you? She couldn't finish the question. Rattlesnake took a bullet in the shoulder. The other one ran. He helped her mount Penny with efficient haste. But they'll regroup and come after us. We need to put distance between us and them before dawn. They rode hard through the night, Zach setting a pace that pushed both horses and riders to their limits. The moon provided just enough light to navigate the rough terrain. Marigold clung to her saddle, her muscles screaming in protest, but she made no complaint. The alternative, being caught by vengeful outlaws, was too terrible to contemplate. Eventually, as the eastern sky began to lighten with the first hint of dawn, Zach signaled a halt beside a shallow stream. The horses drank gratefully while he scouted the surrounding area. We should be safe for a short rest, he said, returning to where Marigold sat on a flat rock, massaging her sore legs. No sign of pursuit yet. Where are we? She asked, accepting the canteen he offered. About halfway back to Silverwater Creek, but I've taken us on a roundabout route. He crouched beside her. How are you holding up? I'll survive, she said with a wan smile, though I may not be able to walk tomorrow. His expression softened with concern. You've been brave, Marigold, braver than most. Something in his tone made her look up. Their eyes met and held in the gray light of early morning. For a suspended moment, the danger, the discomfort, everything fell away except the connection between them. Then a distant sound, the crack of a breaking branch, shattered the moment. Zach was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. Mount up, he ordered quietly. Someone's coming. They were back in their saddles within seconds, Zach leading them away from the stream and into a stand of mesquite trees that offered some cover. They hadn't gone 50 yards when a shot rang out, the bullet splintering bark from a tree trunk inches from Marigold's head. Ride, Zach shouted, spurring Samson into a gallop. Penny needed no encouragement to follow, and Marigold bent low over the mare's neck as they raced across open ground toward a rocky outcropping. More shots followed, but none came as close as the first. They reached the rocks, and Zach dismounted quickly, pulling Marigold from her saddle. Stay down, he ordered, positioning her behind a large boulder. They're coming fast. Through a gap between the rocks, Marigold could see 3 riders approaching Rattlesnake, his arm in a crude sling, the man with the burned scar, and a third man she didn't recognize. All were armed and clearly intent on revenge. "It's all 3 of them," she whispered, fear clenching her stomach. Zach nodded grimly, checking his rifle. "I count 6 bullets here, 12 in my revolver. Should be enough." "Enough to do what?" He met her eyes steadily. "To make sure you get away safely." Before she could respond, he raised his voice to call out to the approaching outlaws. "That's far enough. Next man who comes closer gets a bullet." The riders stopped about 100 yards away. The third man, clearly the leader from his bearing, shouted back. "You've got something that belongs to us, Prescott." "Nothing here belongs to you, Blackburn," Zach replied, surprising Marigold with his apparent knowledge of the outlaw leader. "Ride away while you still can." Rattlesnake's voice joined in. "We ain't leaving without the girl and the jewels, lawman. There's 3 of us and 1 of you." Marigold felt a cold dread settle over her. They wanted her, not just her mother's jewelry. The implications were too terrible to contemplate. "What do they want with me?" she whispered. Zach's jaw tightened. "Nothing good." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small Derringer pistol. "Take this. Last resort only." She accepted the tiny gun with trembling hands. "I don't know if I could actually shoot someone. Hope you don't have to find out." His eyes were intense as they met hers. "Marigold, listen to me. Whatever happens in the next few minutes, when I tell you to run for the horses, you go. No arguments." "I'm not leaving you," she protested. "Yes, you are." His voice brooked no argument. "I didn't pull you from that tree just to watch you die here." Before she could respond, Blackburn called out again. "Last chance, Prescott. Send out the girl and the jewels and maybe we'll let you live." "Not happening, Blackburn," Zach shouted back. Then, under his breath to Marigold, "Stay low and be ready." Without warning, he rose slightly and fired 3 rapid shots. One of the outlaws, the man with the burned scar, cried out and fell from his horse. The other 2 scattered, seeking cover among the scrub brush. "One down," Zach murmured, ducking back behind the boulder as return fire peppered their position. The exchange of gunfire continued for several minutes, neither side gaining a clear advantage. Marigold pressed herself against the rock, heart pounding, the small Derringer clutched in her sweating palm. A sudden cry of pain made her look up. Zach staggered backward, clutching his left arm where a dark stain was spreading rapidly across his sleeve. "You're hit." She gasped, moving toward him. "It's nothing," he grunted, though his face had gone pale. "Just a graze." But Marigold could see it was more than a graze. Blood flowed freely between his fingers as he tried to maintain pressure on the wound. "Let me help," she insisted, tearing a strip from her petticoat to create a makeshift bandage. As she worked to bind his arm, the shooting temporarily ceased. The sudden silence was almost more unnerving than the gunfire had been. "They're trying to flank us," Zach said through gritted teeth. "We've got to move." "You're in no condition, no choice," he interrupted, checking his revolver with his good hand. "Listen carefully. I'm going to provide covering fire. You make a run for the horses, ride hard for that ridge to the north. Don't stop for anything." Marigold tied off the bandage, her hands surprisingly steady despite her fear. "And you'll follow." His eyes met hers, and in that moment, she saw something there that made her heart twist to tenderness, a regret for things unsaid, opportunities missed. "I'll be right behind you," he promised, though something in his voice told her he didn't fully believe it himself. She made a sudden decision, driven by the very real possibility that these might be their final moments together. Leaning forward, she pressed her lips to his in a brief, fierce kiss. "For luck," she whispered as she pulled away, seeing the surprise in his eyes. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. If that's luck, I should have asked for it sooner. He grew serious again. Ready, she nodded, gathering her courage. On my signal, he said, positioning himself to fire. 3, 2, 1, go. Marigold ran, her legs carrying her faster than she would have thought possible. Behind her, Zach's gun roared repeatedly, covering her flight. She reached Penny and swung herself into the saddle, turning to look for Zach. He was running toward her, firing backward as he came. Then, horrifyingly, he stumbled and fell to one knee. In that moment of vulnerability, Rattlesnake appeared from behind a rock. Taking careful aim, without conscious thought, Marigold raised the derringer and fired. The tiny gun bucked in her hand, and Rattlesnake lurched backward, clutching his chest in apparent disbelief before collapsing. Zach stared at her in amazement for a split second before continuing his run toward the horses. He mounted Samson with difficulty, his wounded arm clearly causing him significant pain. "Ride," he commanded, and they spurred their horses northward, away from the remaining outlaw. They galloped flat out for nearly a mile before Zach signaled a slower pace to spare the horses. Only then did the full impact of what she had done hit Marigold. "I shot a man," she said numbly. "I actually shot a man." Zach guided Samson closer to her mare. "You saved my life," he corrected gently. "That took courage." "I didn't think," she admitted. "I just saw him about to shoot you and reacted. Best kind of courage there is." He winced as a jolt from Samson's gait jarred his wounded arm. "We need to tend that wound properly," Marigold said, concern overriding her shock. "You're still bleeding." He nodded reluctantly. "There's a line shack about 2 miles ahead, used by the Arrow-K Ranch for their cowboys during Roundup. Should be empty this time of year. Will Blackburn follow us? Eventually. But he'll need to take care of his fallen comrades first. That buys us some time." He glanced back the way they had come. "Besides, he doesn't know these hills like I do." They rode on at a steady pace, Zach growing noticeably paler as they progressed. By the time the small wooden shack came into view, he was swaying slightly in the saddle. Marigold dismounted quickly and helped him down, supporting his weight as best she could as they entered the humble shelter. Inside was sparse but serviceable: a small iron stove, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, a narrow cot in one corner, and some basic supplies left for passing cowboys. She eased Zach onto the cot and carefully removed his bloodied shirt to examine the wound. The bullet had passed through the fleshy part of his upper arm, missing bone but leaving a nasty wound that had bled profusely. "Lucky," he commented through pale lips. "Could have been worse." "Lucky would have been not getting shot at all," she retorted, searching the shack for anything she could use for proper bandages. To her relief, she found a small medical kit containing some clean cloth, a bottle of whiskey, and a packet of sulfur powder, basic but better than nothing. She heated water on the stove and set to work cleaning the wound as gently as she could. Zach endured her ministrations stoically, flinching only when she poured whiskey over the entry and exit holes to disinfect them. After applying the sulfur powder, she bandaged his arm tightly with the clean strips of cloth. "You've done this before," he observed, watching her efficient movements. "My father was a doctor," she explained. "I often assisted him with minor injuries. Though I'll admit, bullet wounds weren't common in our Baltimore practice." That earned a small smile from him. "You're full of surprises, Marigold Nelson." She finished tying off the bandage and sat back to examine her work. "It should hold, but you've lost a lot of blood. You need rest." "No time for that." He attempted to rise, but she placed a firm hand on his chest. "Yes, time for that. Blackburn doesn't know where we are. The horses need rest as much as you do." Her tone left no room for argument. "A few hours won't make a difference, and it might save your life if we have to ride hard again." Something in her determined expression must have convinced him, for he relaxed back onto the cot. "A few hours," he conceded. "No more." "I'll keep watch," she promised, moving to check that the horses were securely tethered outside. When she returned, Zach's eyes were closed, his breathing steady. Despite the danger they still faced, Marigold felt a curious sense of peace as she sat in the rickety chair beside the cot. They had survived the immediate threat. They had recovered her mother's jewelry. And somewhere along the way, this rough-edged former lawman had become more important to her than she could have imagined possible just days ago. She touched the locket now hanging around her neck once more, where it belonged. Opening it revealed the miniature portraits of her parents, her father's kind eyes, her mother's gentle smile. What would they think of her now, she wondered, their properly raised daughter, in a remote shack with a wounded cowboy, having just shot a man to save another? Her mother, she suspected, would have understood better than expected. Eleanor Nelson had always possessed an adventurous spirit beneath her proper exterior, evident in the stories she told of meeting Marigold's father during his medical mission to a frontier town. "Your mother would be proud," Zach said softly, startling her from her reverie. She hadn't realized he was awake, watching her with those perceptive blue eyes. "How did you know I was thinking about her? The way you were looking at that locket." He shifted slightly, wincing at the movement. "That and most daughters think of their mothers when they're facing difficult times." Marigold smiled, closing the locket gently. "She was braver than people gave her credit for. My father always said she had the heart of a lioness beneath her proper manners." "Sounds like someone else I know," Zach remarked, a warmth in his voice that made her heart skip. Before she could respond, a sound outside the shack froze them both, the unmistakable approach of a horse. Zach was on his feet immediately, pain forgotten as he grabbed his revolver from the table. "Behind me," he ordered quietly, positioning himself between Marigold and the door. They waited in tense silence as the hoofbeats drew closer, then stopped outside the shack. Footsteps approached, heavy on the packed earth. "Prescott," called a familiar voice. "I know you're in there. Come out and face me like a man." Blackburn had found them. Zach's expression hardened. "Stay here," he whispered to Marigold. "No matter what happens." Before she could protest, he called back to the outlaw. "Just me and you then, Blackburn. No more hiding behind your men. They're dead because of you," came the bitter reply. "Seems fitting you should join them." "I'm coming out," Zach announced. "Let's finish this." "No," Marigold hissed, grabbing his arm. "You're injured. You can't." He silenced her with a look of such tenderness it took her breath away. "Trust me," he murmured, gently removing her hand from his arm. "Whatever happens, know that meeting you has been worth everything that came before." With that enigmatic statement, he moved to the door, revolver ready in his right hand while his injured left arm hung at his side. Marigold watched in horror as he stepped outside to face Blackburn. From her position inside, she could see only a portion of what transpired. Zach standing tall despite his wound, Blackburn a few yards away with his gun drawn. The two men faced each other like duelists of old, a deadly silence stretching between them. "Been a long time coming, Prescott," Blackburn said, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "Ever since you took down my brother in that Tucson saloon." "Your brother drew first," Zach replied evenly, "just like you're about to do. Always the righteous one, aren't you?" Blackburn spat on the ground. "Let's see how righteous you look with a bullet in your heart." Marigold couldn't bear to merely watch. Moving silently to the window, she peered out, assessing the situation. Blackburn stood with his back partially to her, his attention focused entirely on Zach. The outlaw's horse was nearby, reins dragging on the ground. A plan formed in her mind, desperate, perhaps foolish, but better than watching helplessly as Zach faced death for her sake. Slipping to the back door of the shack, she eased it open and stepped outside. "You won't walk away from this one, Prescott," Blackburn was saying as she crept along the side of the shack. "I've waited too long for this moment." "Then stop talking and do something about it," Zach challenged, his gaze steady on the outlaw, giving no indication he was aware of Marigold's movement. Blackburn's hand twitched toward his holster. In that crucial second of distraction, Marigold darted forward and seized the reins of his horse, slapping the animal hard on its flank. The startled horse reared and bolted, nearly trampling Blackburn in the process. The outlaw whirled in surprise, momentarily forgetting Zach a fatal mistake. Zach's revolver barked once, and Blackburn staggered, a look of disbelief crossing his face before he crumpled to the ground. In the sudden silence that followed, Marigold stood frozen, the echo of the gunshot still ringing in her ears. Zach approached the fallen outlaw cautiously, kicking his gun away before checking for signs of life. "He's done," he said simply, turning to Marigold with an expression that mingled relief, admiration, and something deeper that made her heart race. "That was either the bravest or the most foolhardy thing I've ever seen." "You said something similar when I insisted on coming with you," she reminded him, her voice steadier than she felt. "I believe your exact words were the bravest or the most foolhardy woman I've ever met." A smile broke across his face, transforming his features. "I stand by that assessment." The tension of the moment dissolved, replaced by the simple, overwhelming joy of survival. Without thinking, Marigold closed the distance between them and threw her arms around his neck, mindful of his injured arm. Zach's good arm encircled her waist, pulling her close. "We made it," she whispered against his shoulder. "It's over." "Thanks to you," he murmured into her hair. "I don't know many men, let alone women, who would have had the courage to do what you just did." She pulled back slightly to look into his face, suddenly aware of their intimate embrace. His eyes were intent on hers, filled with warmth and a question he seemed hesitant to ask. "Marigold," he began, his voice rougher than usual. "I know we've only known each other a few days, but whatever he intended to say was lost as his legs suddenly buckled. Loss of blood and the exertion of the confrontation had finally taken their toll. Marigold barely managed to help him back inside to the cot, worry replacing the moment's elation. "You need proper medical attention," she said firmly, checking his bandage to find fresh blood seeping through. "We have to get to town." "After I rest," he insisted weakly. "Just an hour or two." This time, she didn't argue. His color was alarmingly poor, his forehead beaded with sweat despite the coolness of the shack. She rewrapped his wound as best she could, then sat beside him, holding his hand as he drifted into an uneasy sleep. The next few hours passed in anxious vigilance. Marigold tended to Zach, keeping his fever at bay with cool compresses. When he was stable enough to travel, she helped him mount Samson, then secured Blackburn's horse for herself, leaving Penny tethered at the shack for the ranch hands to find. The journey back to Silverwater Creek was slow and arduous. Zach, despite his weakened state, insisted they take time to bury Blackburn properly, not for his sake, he explained, but for our own. By late afternoon, the small town appeared on the horizon, a welcome sight after their ordeal. They rode directly to the doctor's house at the end of Main Street, where Dr. Wilson, a gruff but capable physician, immediately took charge of Zach's care. "You did a fine job with these bandages, young lady," he commented as he examined the wound. "Probably saved his arm, if not his life." "She has a habit of saving me," Zach remarked with a weak smile, his eyes finding Marigold's across the room, while the doctor worked, Marigold gave a brief account of their confrontation with the Outlaws to Sheriff Henderson, who had been summoned from his office. The lawman listened with growing amazement. "You two took down Rattlesnake Joe's entire gang?" he asked incredulously. "We've been after them for months." "Mostly him," Marigold said, nodding toward Zach. "I just helped a little." Zach's snort of disagreement was audible even from the examination table. "She shot one outlaw and outsmarted another. I'd say that's more than a little." The sheriff shook his head in wonder. "Well, there was a reward out for them, $500, which by rights belongs to you too." "That's very generous," Marigold began, but the sheriff waved away her thanks. "It's not generosity, madam. It's earned." He tipped his hat to her. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to send telegrams to Tucson and the Territorial Marshal's office. They'll want full reports." After the sheriff departed, Dr. Wilson finished treating Zach's wound, cleaning and stitching it properly before applying a fresh bandage. "You'll need to rest that arm for at least 2 weeks," he instructed. "No riding, no shooting, no heroics." Zach nodded solemnly, though a twinkle in his eye suggested he found the last restriction amusing. "Yes, sir. See that he follows orders," the doctor told Marigold as he packed away his instruments. "He strikes me as the type to push himself before he's ready." "I'll make sure he behaves," she promised, earning another smile from Zach. Once they were alone in the doctor's front parlor, a curious awkwardness fell between them. So much had happened in such a short time that Marigold hardly knew where to begin. "The sheriff mentioned a reward," she said finally, breaking the silence. $500, Zach nodded. "It's yours. Should be enough to get you to San Francisco in style, with some left over to start your new life there." "It's ours," she corrected. "You earned it as much as I did." "More, in fact." He shrugged his good shoulder. "I don't need much, never have." A question that had been nagging at her finally found voice. "What will you do now, when you're healed, I mean?" "Not sure," he admitted, studying her face. "Depends on certain factors." "What factors?" she asked, her heart suddenly beating faster. Zach rose from the examination table and crossed to where she stood. Despite his pallor and the obvious pain of his wound, he moved with the same fluid grace she had first noticed when he cut her free from the tree. "Marigold," he said, his voice low and serious. "Before I was interrupted by inconveniently passing out, I was about to say something important." She looked up into his face, hardly daring to breathe. "Yes. I know we've only known each other a short time. By all normal standards, it's far too soon for what I'm feeling." His good hand reached up to gently touch her cheek. "But these past few days have shown me more about you than years might have under ordinary circumstances. Your courage, your compassion, your spirit, they're extraordinary." Marigold's heart soared at his words, but she maintained her composure. "Are you saying what I think you're saying, Mr. Prescott?" A smile tugged at his mouth. "I'm saying that the thought of you continuing to San Francisco without me feels wrong. I'm saying that if you're willing, I'd like the chance to court you properly to see if what we've found in these extraordinary circumstances might flourish in ordinary days." Joy bubbled up within her, but practicality asserted itself. "What about your wandering ways? You said yourself you go where you're needed." "Maybe what I need has changed," he said simply. "Maybe I've been looking for something all these years without knowing exactly what it was." His eyes held her steadily. "Until I cut a beautiful, brave woman free from a tree and told her she was safe." Tears pricked at Marigold's eyes. "I think I'd like that chance very much, Zach Prescott." His smile broadened. "Then it's settled. Once I'm healed enough to travel, we can decide where to go. San Francisco if you still wish it, or somewhere else entirely." "Together," she said, placing her hand over his heart. "Together," he agreed, bending to place a gentle kiss on her lips, a promise of all that might follow. 3 weeks later, Marigold stood on the platform of the Silverwater Creek train station, watching as Zach secured their luggage. His arm was healing well, though he still wore it in a sling most days to prevent re-injury. The reward money for Rattlesnake's gang had indeed been paid in full, providing them with resources to begin their new life. After much discussion, they had decided to continue to San Francisco as originally planned. Marigold would visit her aunt as intended, while Zach had accepted a position with a private security firm that specialized in protecting gold shipments from the Comstock lode. But those practical matters, important as they were, felt secondary to the deeper change in their lives. Over the weeks of Zach's recovery, their bond had deepened, each day revealing new facets of the other to cherish. Marigold had written to her aunt, explaining the extraordinary circumstances of her delayed arrival and introducing Zach as her intended. Aunt Cordelia's reply had been swift and enthusiastic, expressing delight that her niece had found happiness and assuring them both of a warm welcome. "All aboard," called the conductor, interrupting her reflections. Zach appeared at her side, tucking their tickets into his vest pocket. "Ready for the next adventure, Miss Nelson?" She smiled up at him, taking his offered arm. "More than ready, Mr. Prescott." As they boarded the train that would carry them west, Marigold thought of the strange twists of fate that had brought them to this moment. How a terrifying ordeal being tied to a tree by outlaws had led to finding the man who would become the center of her world. The train whistle blew, wheels began to turn, and they settled into their seats side by side. Through the window, the dusty buildings of Silverwater Creek began to recede, giving way to the vast, beautiful wilderness beyond. "No regrets?" Zach asked quietly, taking her hand in his. Marigold shook her head, her mother's locket warm against her skin and her future bright before her. "None whatsoever." The train gathered speed, carrying them towards San Francisco and all that awaited them there. But Marigold knew that the greatest journey had already begun the moment a brave cowboy had cut her loose and said those simple words, "You're safe now." 3 years later, Marigold sat on the wide porch of their hillside home, watching the sun set over San Francisco Bay. The view never failed to take her breath away, the golden light on the water, the ships moving in and out of the harbor, the bustling city spreading below them. "Mama, look what I found." 5-year-old Alina came running up the steps, her dark hair flying behind her, a small shell clutched in her tiny hand. Though not their biological child, she had become theirs in every way that mattered when they adopted her after her parents' friends of Zach's died in a ferry accident the previous year. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Marigold said, examining the pearlescent spiral with appropriate admiration. "Where did you find such a treasure?" "Papa showed me in the garden," Alina explained, her blue eyes so like Zach's sparkling with excitement. "He said it's from the time when the ocean covered everything, even our house." "Did he now?" Marigold smiled, glancing toward the garden where Zach was finishing his evening inspection of their vegetable patch. "Well, Papa knows many interesting things, doesn't he?" Alina nodded solemnly before skipping off to add the shell to her collection of special finds. Marigold watched her go, heart full of the unexpected joy this child had brought into their lives. "She's going to be a naturalist, that one," Zach commented, climbing the porch steps to join his wife. He was still lean and strong, though a few threads of silver had appeared at his temples. The years of steady work and family life suited him, softening some of his harder edges while preserving the essential strength and integrity that had first drawn her to him. "Like her father," Marigold teased, making room for him on the porch swing. "Always bringing home some curiosity from your travels." He settled beside her, his arm automatically going around her shoulders. "Speaking of travels, I received a telegram from the company today. They want me to supervise the new route to Sacramento. Is it dangerous?" She asked, though she knew he would tell her the truth regardless. Their relationship had been built on honesty from the beginning. "No more than usual," he assured her. "Less, perhaps, since it's well-patrolled territory." He paused, studying her face. "It would mean being home more regularly, though. No more long trips to Nevada or Idaho." Marigold smiled, placing her hand over his. "That would be wonderful news in any case, but perhaps especially now." His eyebrows rose questioningly. "Oh." She guided his hand to rest on her still flat stomach. "Dr. Wilson confirmed it yesterday. We're going to have a baby, Zach. Eleanor will have a little brother or sister come winter." Joy transformed his features as he pulled her into a gentle embrace. "Marigold," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "That's the best news I could imagine." They sat in contented silence for a moment, watching the last rays of sunlight gild the bay. From inside the house came the sound of Eleanor singing to herself as she arranged her shell collection. "Did you ever imagine this?" Marigold asked softly. "That night when you found me tied to that tree," Zach shook his head. "I was just focused on getting you to safety, but later when we were riding away together." He smiled at the memory. "I knew there was something special about you. Something I couldn't walk away from." "I'm glad you didn't," she said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I can't imagine my life without you in it." "You'll never have to," he promised, pressing a kiss to her temple. As darkness fell, they remained on the porch, talking quietly of the future, the baby to come, Eleanor's education. The security company Zach was gradually building, the charity work Marigold had begun with her aunt for the city's orphan children. It was a life neither could have foreseen on that fateful night in the Arizona desert. A life built day by day from the ashes of danger and the seeds of courage. A life that began, in so many ways, with a simple act of rescue and 7 words that had changed everything. "You're safe now." And she was. They both were. Safe in the home they had created together, in the love that had begun in the most unlikely of circumstances, in the future they continued to build with each passing day. For Marigold and Zach Prescott, what had started with an outlaw's rope and a cowboy's knife had become something rare and precious, a love as vast as the western sky and as enduring as the mountains that had witnessed their beginning.